Utah's newest quarterback, Devin Dampier, is going to take the Big 12 by storm in 2025.
You are Locked On Utes, your daily podcast on the Utah Utes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for making Locked On Utes your first listen and view of the day. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, available wherever you get your podcasts. If this is your first time listening, make sure you like and subscribe. Today's episode of Locked On Utes is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege, all caps, no spaces, for $20 off your first purchase. My name is JT Wistrcill, former intern inside the University of Utah Athletic Department. And on today's show, we're going to be talking about Devin Dampier. So who better to have on than someone who's covered Devin Dampier? Sean Reider of the Albuquerque Journal, kind enough to join me for this episode. And Sean, I meant the statement I said at the start. I believe Devin Dampier is going to pose a huge problem for Big 12 defenses. I think he's going to take the conference by storm. When you look at what he did, I mean, the led an offense with Jason Beck, who's also at Utah, of course, too, that was fourth in the country in yards per game at 484 yards per game, scored 33 points. He had 3,394 yards, one of the best dual threat QBs in the country. I just feel like he's ready to make this leap. I feel like the supporting cast with, once again, his offensive coordinator and some of the other pieces, that offensive line being there, I'm really excited about what Devin Dampier can do in 2025. How confident are you, having seen what he did in the Mountain West? Do you think he's ready to take on defenses that are a step up?
Yeah, I really think he is. And I mean, you know, and I think he's shown that he's able to do that, you know, even last year too. I mean, he gave Auburn fits at points. Obviously, he beat Washington State. And you could probably say that's more akin to a P4 level defense. I mean, he just a really good football player that's really, really hard to game plan for in a lot of different respects.
Yeah, he put together a really impressive season. We highlighted some of those numbers. He was like the only one, I believe, to run for 1,000 yards and throw for over 2,500 yards in the country. So incredibly impressive numbers. And I love the point you made too about, hey, he's already done it a little bit against P4 defenses. Joe Coles of the Deseret News, he wrote in a story about Dampier that he threw for 725 yards, 5 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, had 354 rushing yards and 5 rushing touchdowns against that combination of P4 teams, Arizona, Auburn, and he also included Washington State too. Watching those games and covering him, did you feel like he was at home in those games? Maybe still had some room to improve, but did you just feel like okay, he belongs on the field with these defense and these players?
It's maybe a little bit tough to say that in some ways, because certainly, like, you know, I thought UNM's offensive line was pretty good last year. I thought their backfield was pretty good. I thought their wide receivers were mostly okay. But it's a little tough to kind of gauge Devin in that atmosphere because, you know, at the very least, you know, he might be up to par in that environment, but not all of the rest of the pieces were always up to par. So the kind of the full picture there is a little bit tough. But no, I mean, frankly, there was a lot of anxiety among UNM's fan base, even before, you know, Bronco left, Bronco Mendenhall, the former head coach at New Mexico, and kind of before the portal opened, like, you know, a lot of people coming to me like, hey, is Devin staying? What have you heard? Like, yada, yada. And it's like, I haven't heard anything quite yet. It's October. But no, there was a lot of anxiety and people were kind of expecting that to a certain degree. So no, I think he absolutely has a skill set. I think the main thing with him, frankly, will just be kind of cleaning up the turnovers.
Absolutely. Threw 12 interceptions last year and going to be facing even better secondaries. So that's the concern with Dampier. Also want to talk to you about Jason Beck and some of the other New Mexico players that Utah's added. But I do want to wind it back with Dampier because this is quarterback. It's the most important position on the field. Utah lost most of their games last year, Sean, because of poor quarterback play. So I do feel like even just improved quarterback play in that spot could literally lead to a 5-win improvement just by how much better Devin Dampier, I believe, will be on paper compared to who Utah had last year. So in order to better understand Dampier, I want to take it all the way back. I want to take it back to the player who at New Mexico was a 3-star recruit coming into this Logos program, had just been named Max Pep's Arizona Player of the Year in 22. What was the excitement around landing Dampier? And even his freshman year, I know he earned opportunities on the field.
You know, 3-star, you know, recruits coming to New Mexico are always going to get a certain level of buzz. And there was a little bit of buzz around Dampier, but I think there was kind of you know, you don't know what to expect. I think some people just kind of looked at the measurements and all that and was like, well, I guess we'll see. The thing that stood out to me, because he was an early enrollee, and I saw his first practice, you know, was really just how live his arm was. I was not 100% anticipating that, and but it was kind of a wild arm. Not a lot of touch. I mean, he could throw it a long way, but not an incredible amount of touch at that point, and just kind of kept developing. It was a little bit of a little bit of a competition between him and this other quarterback, DC Tapscott, for kind of the backup role that season. Dylan Hopkins was the quarterback. UAB transferred. He had played under Brian Vincent, who was the offensive coordinator at the time when he was at UAB, so there's a kind of connection there. But I think it was really the Wyoming game that season in 2023. Hopkins went out with an injury, and it seemed like things just kind of opened up in that game. UNM was down, and they were kind of getting bullied at that point, at least on the offensive side. And, Dampier came in and just ran and ran and ran. You'll see this probably a bit at Utah this year, where he's kind of going east in the backfield, west in the backfield, east in the backfield. And everybody's, in the stadium kind of has that anxiety, like, oh my gosh, like get north or something, or throw the ball at the least. And, almost led him to kind of a comeback win in that game too. And from that point on, there was a ton of buzz among the fan base in particular. And really they kept figuring out ways to use him as kind of a wildcat quarterback. Fresno State that year might be a good game to go back and look at too, in terms of the ways they used him in that, that scheme in particular as a wildcat quarterback. And then, Boise State, I think they lost 42-14 that game. But it kind of felt like a hopeful game for some Lobo fans in particular, because, they frankly, they got blown out. But really, Dampier, at a place that's kind of tough to play, did a pretty all right job in his first career start. So, yeah, to kind of go back to your point, I think he certainly showed in that freshman year that there are flashes of the guy that he could become. And then it just kind of ended up being a perfect marriage of, of quarterback, coordinator, and scheme last year with New Mexico.
Well, yeah, speaking of last year, so has those moments as a freshman. Did everyone think he was going to be the guy going into the 24 season? And then also just, what was it like covering him? Did he surpass your expectations you had and most fans had? I saw he was the first ever New Mexico quarterback to make first team All Mountain West.
You really, you heard a lot of good things about the offense, and you watched the offense in spring practice and fall camp, and you were like, hey, this looks like a good unit, but and I think, Jason Beck was the one who said this to me too, last fall. Like you never know until it's the real deal, until it's, offensive linemen going against other teams' defensive linemen, all that too. But really from the get-go, that Montana State game, a game they lost, Dampier ended up playing really well. And it was kind of a revelation for UNM fans and the like too. And it just kind of got, even as they started, 0-4 start, really the only kind of dull spot in that start was losing to Fresno State. And from there on out, Dampier was just a huge difference maker. The thing that, that always stands out to me about him in particular, and that really stood out this year, is that, there's a lot of mobile quarterbacks out there. There's a lot of guys that can move in the pocket and all that do, and create a little bit too. For me, it's just how explosive he can be when he runs. He basically ripped them right back into the Wyoming game this last season with this, I think, a 92-yard touchdown run. He had 200 yards rushing that day. And you just, a lot of mobile quarterbacks, you just don't see that among guys.
Yeah, 200 yards rushing. I don't even know how many quarterbacks in the Big 12 did that in general last year, or in college football in general too. So that's just a testament to Dampier's skill set. Want to continue to talk about Dampier, but obviously one of the biggest reasons he was successful was Jason Beck as well, and some of the supporting cast that he had. Beck, as well as one of his favorite targets and New Mexico's second best running back, are also now transferred and at the University of Utah. Want to talk about their presence and what they'll bring to the team in 2025 in one moment. But first, today's episode of Locked On Utes is brought to you by our great friends at Game Time. Game Time is here for you. If you're attending the NFL playoff games, it's an experience like no other, and no venue is better than the Super Bowl. Now that the matchup is set, the energy, the excitement, the connection with other fans is unmatched, especially in New Orleans. I remember the thrill of seeing my favorite team win playoff games, and something I'd love to see is eventually make it to the Super Bowl, but I'm a Vikings fan, so we'll see how that goes. And those memories are ones they obviously never forget. This year, Game Time is making it even easier to create those unforgettable memories and moments with their new feature called Game Picks. It filters out the fluff to show you only the best deals on great seats, so you can focus on what matters, being there. I use Game Picks to grab tickets for an upcoming playoff game, and it could not have been easier. I found a super deal that gave me incredible value for amazing seats, and I could even preview the view from my spot before buying. The all-in price is a game changer. No surprise fees at checkouts, plus knowing my tickets are backed by the Game Time guarantee gives me complete peace of mind. What does Game Time offer? Well, how about a seat view? So when you make your purchase, you know exactly what kind of a view you're going to be getting. Also, that low price guarantee is another great plus. There's even event cancellation protection, job loss protection, so many amazing deals, not just on sports, but concert, comedy, and theater events near you as well. You can take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege. All caps, no spaces. For $20 off your first purchase, terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lower price, guaranteed. All right, Sean, keeping it rolling here. We're going to get to Dampier a little bit more in a moment, but let's talk about Jason Beck. I mentioned the fourth best offense in college football last year. What did he bring to the Lobos, and how confident are you that he can succeed at Utah?
It was really, when he got hired in, because, longtime Bronco guy. I've been a quarterback coach under him at BYU and Virginia for a really long time before. And then he was the first time FBS coordinator at Syracuse for 1 year before coming to New Mexico. And it was really kind of a question of, what he was going to bring to the table, because Syracuse had some unique dynamics. Obviously, Dino Babers was the head coach there. You didn't know how much it was Dino's influence. And frankly, they had a lot of injuries. I think they started, if I remember correctly, they started a tight end in a game against Pitt at quarterback. So you didn't quite know. But no, I think the number one thing with Beck is that, he's shown, and he showed it particularly this last year in New Mexico, that he can create an explosive offense. And they can really evaluate talent. There were some guys that were kind of under the radar, transfer additions and all that, guys like NaQuariRogers to a certain degree, and guys that had already been there, like Ryan Davis, that they just kind of took to the next level and found the right roles for them. Really explosive offense. I think if you wanted to label it in particular, although I think the label shifted on a game-to-game basis sometimes, you probably call it a veer and shoot. And, again, kind of going back to that idea of, taking what you have and working with it and really maxing it out. They had a comeback win, kind of an insane game in a lot of respects against Utah State. And that was a game that they lost two of their running backs, Javen Jacobs and NaQuariRogers, both just out for the game. And so they had to key in on Eli Sanders, who's now, just transferred to USC. Key in on Dampier too. And not even somehow, we saw it, came back and won that game. And it was really, some pretty impressive on-the-fly adjustments to make that happen. And another thing I'll add too is, in some ways I'm envious of Utah fans and Utah media and the like and all that too, because Beck is frankly one of the best guys I've ever covered, in covering college athletics and all that too. Just a tremendously nice guy, explains things really well, very, very, very open. About decision-making and what they're doing. And I think that's something that Utah hasn't quite had recently. No. I think that will be appreciated and will probably go over pretty well at the very least.
It absolutely will. I think one thing that excites me is his adaptability. That's something you mentioned, and just the way he uses and maximizes his players from a season ago. And when you're talking about a guy like Jason Beck, you talked about BYU quarterback has some of those BYU ties when he first was coming to Utah. There were some people like, oh, what's he going to do? But at the end of the day, I've always looked at it like this. He's a really good offensive coordinator, and that is what Utah needed. He ended up being Utah's third choice based on a lot of reports, but just because he's your third choice does not mean at all he can't end up being the best. And I am really excited about what Jason Beck is going to bring here. Was there a moment or just a play when you think about like what Jason Beck does where you're like, okay, New Mexico's got a dude at offensive coordinator?
Yeah, I think it really was the Montana game at the start. Yeah. Honestly, I don't remember the exact sequence in the game. But I think it was they're at the 34-yard line, and New Mexico's driving and they lined up in a heavy set on one play, and it's just basically, a halfback dive, just very simple, bread and butter offset formation and all that. And then they set it up against Montana State and run the exact same play basically, but fake it, run the naked bootleg with Devin Dampier in for a touchdown. And I swear, I mean, that like, you would be shocked. I mean, they put it on film once, but frankly, I mean, they ran that thing multiple times for touchdowns throughout the season, or key games and all that too. That to me, I mean, that really stood out. That kind of, that level of. I think one thing you see in a lot of good coordinators is kind of that. You want to make things look a little bit more complicated than they actually are. You can't be complicated for for players and all that, but it needs to be complicated for defense and all that. And I think he found ways to do that over and over and over again. And again, just going back to it too, I mean, like really, I mean, they found ways to generate, chunk plays in the run game that, frankly, would kind of surprise me to a certain degree in games.
Yep, it was an incredibly successful ground game and an incredibly successful offense. Jason Beck did a great job. Devin Dampier did too. But there were other pieces as well that helped this New Mexico offense go. Two of them going to be coming with Jason Beck to Salt Lake City. The first one I want to talk about is wide receiver Ryan Davis. He was the second leading receiver for the Lobos, 747 yards and 3 touchdowns. What is Utah getting in Davis?
Yeah, you're getting a really effective and seasoned, kind of, he grades out in the slot mold. They didn't always use him in the slot, but he certainly got, he's got plenty of wiggle to play in the slot too. Davis was a guy, I kind of touched on this earlier too, that, he transferred in before the 2023 season and frankly just had a million injuries, that kind of held him up at UAB and all that too, and wasn't really able to get much of a groove there. And it was kind of touch and go in 2023. He was with New Mexico. And he was a guy I was really kind of curious about. Is this guy going to fall by the wayside of a new coaching staff? Is he going to get involved? And he ended up getting involved. I mean, he was, second leading receiver on the team. Yep. Was really able to kind of help step in and fill the void at points when Luke Weissong is now at Arizona when he got injured for a little bit. Again, I mean, good wiggle. And I think if you're curious whether or not he can compete against the P4 level, I would go watch the Auburn tape, because I think that was like his at the time, that was like his, career best performance. And he did that against Auburn, which was dysfunctional in a lot of regards this season, but I wouldn't put it all on the defense.
Yeah, no, absolutely not. And still an SEC team. So still got some defenders that'll be playing in the NFL level more than likely to. So definitely excited about that. The big three, you will never hear it referred to if you're listening to this show as a big three again, but Jason Beck, Devin Dampier, and Ryan Davis. There's going to be a key third down, or what Jason Beck's going to do. He's going to dial up his best play. Devin Dampier, it's going to be third and long. So it's going to be a pass play. And then who is Dampier going to be looking for? Ryan Davis. A guy has that familiarity to, that connection with. That is something that's going to be it is just big when you're adjusting to a new offense, new plays, or not a new offense, but an offense, but it's changed a little bit just to navigate the new level. Having that familiar target is something that's so big, and really excited that Dampier gets that in Davis, along with some of the other transfer receivers that Utah has added. But Davis isn't the only guy that the Lobos, or former Lobo, that is now a member of the Utah Utes. NaQuariRogers was the second leading running back rusher. Eli was at Temple, was your other back, correct?
Eli Sanders, yeah.
Sanders is now at USC, so he was the other guy. Utah, at one point, we thought we might be in on him, but I know he ended up going up to the Trojans. And we got Rayshawn Parker from Washington State, so still excited about that. I know you also got to cover him.
Very good back. I like him a lot.
So we're excited about him. But RB2 is very much a mystery. And NaQuariRogers, 380 yards, second back with the Lobos a year ago, 5 touchdowns. Not much of a receiving back, but what is he going to bring to Jason Beck's offense? And do you think he has a chance to be RB2 for this team?
Yeah, in terms of, I think him being RB2, I'll say this, really one thing that I always kind of talked about with Jason with the offense was like, do you want a bell cow at running back?
Yeah.
Is that something that you want? And he said, not really. He's like, I mean, if we feel we have a guy that's talented enough, we need to just have him running the football as much as possible, then sure. And that really, I mean, like, obviously, like, New Mexico had guys that are now last year, guys that are now like P4 running backs and all that too, or at least have gone to P4 schools and all that. So you'd think like, well, why wasn't a guy the bell cow and all that too? But he said the way that they approached it is that basically they had packages, right? Sanders kind of started the season and ended the season with some stuff in between, where he ended up kind of being an every down back, his speed back and all that too. Rogers was a guy that they kind of had a package for because of just how physical he was. I mean, he was easily the most physical guy they had in the backfield. And really, I mean, they were using him in a lot of short yardage situations to start the season. And then he had this game against New Mexico State, which wasn't a great defense this year. But at the same time, I mean, he was bowling over dudes. I mean, he really brought that physical element that they just didn't have. So I think that's the one thing you can look forward to. I mean, he's going to bring that. I would anticipate that I think Parker is a guy that could definitely work in short yard situations too, honestly. I mean, I still think he's a good back. But I would imagine that Rogers is a guy that can 100% carve out a role for him to start in those kind of short yard situations. And when they're going up against a defense that requires you to kind of lean on a physical presence out of the backfield. And I wouldn't be shocked if he carves out more of a role beyond that.
Yeah, I think Rogers, Parker is not the biggest back. He's more known for his speed and quickness. So if Rogers is the guy, the goal line packages, whatever, bring him in. You need to punch one in, need to run over a guy. And that's exactly what Utah could need. So I definitely think Rogers is a chance to be RB2. I think at least he'll be RB3. I think Davis is going to be a day one starter in the slot for Dampier with the familiarity he has there. And obviously I do expect Devin Dampier to be a big contributor for this team. I want to end this show with one big question we have for Devin Dampier, as well as talk about just the transfer portal from a different perspective. What am I talking about? We're going to be discussing in one moment. But first, today's episode of Locked On Utes is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel Sportsbook. FanDuel has you covered. From the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting. And right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win your first bet. That's $300 to keep the action going. The FanDuel app is easy to navigate, and the variety of bets keep every game exciting. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly. No waiting around for your winnings, whether you're betting on your favorite team or just looking to add some extra excitement to the NFL playoffs. FanDuel has you covered. It's not just the NFL playoffs. We are out of college football games, unfortunately, but NBA, NHL, and college basketball in full swing on FanDuel. Today, we got the Super Bowl matchup set, so you can head over to FanDuel and check out the latest lines and odds today. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today and get started with $300 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. You can join at FanDuel today. All right, Sean Reider of the Albuquerque Journal closing this episode out with me. Sean, I want to ask you a transfer portal question in a moment, but I just want to say this. If Devin Dampier, Jason Beck, the other players we've discussed, if they propel Utah football back to a Big 12 contender, and I'll even say like into the Big 12 title game, how surprised would you be?
Ooh, honestly, I mean, if they propel, no, I really don't think I would be all that surprised. I think, I like you kind of mentioned, I think Beck wasn't the guy they were immediately looking for, but I think Beck is a guy that's going to be successful at Utah one way or the other. And again, I mean, I've kind of raved about Devon on this show and all that too, but frankly, I mean, it is on Devon to kind of show that, one, that proved to everybody that he is a P4 starter, and two, to kind of cut down on those turnovers will probably be the most effective way to kind of help that out. But frankly, I mean, he's kind of a nightmare to game plan for, and Jason's offense in general have been also nightmares to game plan for as well. So I really don't think I would be shocked if that happened, honestly.
We've talked about a lot of different numbers and things when it comes to Devin Dampier, but at the end of the day, just one thing we haven't talked about is something the numbers don't always show. He is the ability to keep plays alive. He is incredibly hard to sack. Sean, correct me if I'm wrong, 4 sacks last year only?
Yeah, just 4 sacks in the season. And that's a credit to and I think they were the last team in the country, I believe, to have not allowed a sack. And that was partially a credit to an offensive line that, frankly, was a lot better than I thought they would be. And also, I mean, it's like you said, I mean, like he has a really, I don't want to call it rare, but kind of an innate ability to create. And just really kind of keep things going and just kind of frankly, with him at quarterback and, things kind of in a groove, you'll never really feel you're out of a game, whether you're, down by 2 or 3 touchdowns, honestly.
And Utah's offense has not been fun in the last 2 years. So that is something that every fan is looking forward to. Isaac Wilson, who started a lot for Utah last year, was a freshman. His pocket presence was not great. He was frequently sacked for holding on to the ball too long. And the fact that Dampier, and he's playing with one of the best returning tackle tandems in college football. Got to shore up the interior of the offensive line, but the blind side and just the right tackle protection will be really good for Devin Dampier. So that's incredibly exciting and really looking forward to what this team can do in 2025. But Sean, one of the reasons that Utah is so good is because they have taken a lot from the Lobos. And this is a conversation I wanted to have with someone else who covered a team at the Group of Five level, because Utah has lost a couple of key players to bigger brands. They've lost them to the SEC, even to BYU, who's a bigger brand right now than you. They usually are. The BYU brand just nationally is. But for you to see, Bronco Mendenhall leaves, Jason Beck, there's been so much departure. What is it like today for a program like New Mexico, and just how much turnover has there been this year for New Mexico?
I think, in terms of this year in particular, because frankly, Danny Gonzalez was fired as head coach, and there was before Bronco came in, and there was a lot of, portal turnover with that as well. But I think for this year in particular, it was, I don't want to call it, like heartbreaking or anything like that. Like I really kind of exaggerate it, but it was kind of bitter for fans as well. I don't think any fans really begrudge guys like Devon or Ryan or NaQuari or Eli Sanders or whoever for, their coach leaving and them, taking on a different opportunity at a higher level. I don't think they begrudge that at all. I think everybody recognizes that, while UNM actually has a pretty robust NIL situation, it is kind of tough to compete with P4. It's not kind of tough. It is tough to compete with P4 schools in that regard and the like. And yeah, going back to it too, I don't think there's any ill will towards the players. I think there's certainly some ill will towards Bronco, which might be playing to the audience for this podcast a little bit. But it was kind of a whirlwind. I mean, it really was. And I don't know how much you've seen at Utah, but it really was, one guy here, one guy there, and then Devon's leaving, and then it's like a flood. The coach is leaving, this coach is leaving, 4 of these guys are leaving and all that too. So I think it was kind of a mix of bitter and overwhelming to a certain degree for, fans in particular. But honestly, I think those kinds of wounds have been kind of covered over and are starting to heal, because UNM, at the end of the day, they're taking really good FCS players at the moment from, good FCS teams, and adding them to their squad right now. So just kind of the circle of life in college football, I should say.
That is a fantastic way to put it. It absolutely is the circle for life. And honestly, if Devin Dampier has the type of season that I think he's capable of with Utah, there is definitely a chance he's not back in Salt Lake. Like, will he probably be in 2025, 2026? Yes. But there is a chance that he balls out and some of these other programs go, we want him to be our starting quarterback. And when those NIL funds come in, as you mentioned, the circle of life, Utah ain't got what Ohio State got, spend $20 million on a roster. I'm not saying Devin Dampier is going to Ohio State, but I'm just saying, like, when some of the big brands come calling, it can get really tough. So it is crazy. That's the cycle. Us Utah fans have been frustrated by some of the guys that left, but at the same time, we've done the same thing with those. When guys entering the portal, we've drawn them to our program. So it's just the way things work. But it is absolutely crazy. The transfer portal always is. Sean, really appreciate you taking the time to come on, my man. Please tell everyone where they can head over, find your stuff, and just give you a follow at.
Yeah, you can find us at abqjournal.com. All the I don't know how many Utah fans really want to read about New Mexican football, but abqjournal.com for UNM football coverage from me, and then some of you guys maybe are familiar with Jeff Grammer, who covers UNM basketball, so that's where we kind of hold down. And you can follow me on Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it at Lenaway Rider.
Well, you said you don't know if everyone's interested in reading the Albuquerque Journal for New Mexico football. I was, and that's how I ended up finding you. So really appreciate you taking the time to hop on, Sean. Thanks again.
Thanks for having me, JT. Appreciate it.
That's going to do it for today's Locked On Utes. We look forward to being back with you tomorrow to cover the latest in Utah football and Utah athletics.